Welcome to the Portuguese channel. We are excited for today's guests who are going to talk about an important topic for our community, a disease called hereditary ATTR amyloidosis, also known as hATTR amyloidosis. hATTR amyloidosis is a rare condition that affects an estimated 50,000 people worldwide and disproportionately impacts people of Portuguese descent. We are going to hear a lot about the disease, from symptoms to how it is diagnosed, and importantly, how to talk to your doctor and where to get more information. But first, let me welcome our guests. Dr. Anthony Gerasi is a neurologist from Northwell Health in New York who specializes in treating hATTR amyloidosis. Dr. Gerasi is joined by Júlio Matos, who was diagnosed with this disease a few years ago, and his daughter Renee. Together, they are going to share their experiences since Júlio started seeing his first symptoms. Thank you everyone for being with us today. Let's get started. Dr. Gerasi, you are here to talk about hATTR amyloidosis. What's that and why is it important to our Portuguese audience?
Thank you for having me today. hATTR amyloidosis is a rare inherited condition that is associated with multiple symptoms and organ systems in the body. It is estimated to affect about 50,000 people worldwide, but disproportionately affects persons of Portuguese descent. So it's more common in the Portuguese population than the general population. It's caused by a protein which is referred to as amyloid. Amyloid is just a term that means a misfolded protein. When a protein in the human body is misfolded, it doesn't allow the cell and the system in the body to function properly. In hATTR amyloidosis, the protein comes from a gene which is called the TTR gene. As I mentioned, there are many symptoms that can be associated with it. It can worsen quickly over time. Misdiagnosis is common, and so that's why we're here today to talk about it and educate your audience.
What are the symptoms of hATTR amyloidosis?
The symptoms of hATTR amyloidosis, as I mentioned, are very broad, and they affect everyone differently, even members of one family who have the genetic variant. The symptoms tend to be quite generic, like numbness, tingling, burning in the fingers and toes. Dizziness can occur when standing. There can be digestive issues, weakness of the feet, making it difficult to walk. Carpal tunnel syndrome is also very common in this condition. And symptoms start anywhere from the mid-20s to the 60s, age 60 and older. And as I mentioned, it can worsen over time.
Júlio, thank you for joining us today. You are living with hATTR amyloidosis. Can you tell us what symptoms you experienced that made you realize you needed to see a doctor?
First started with a burning sensation under my toes. They start with a tingling, and then the burning feet. And they also started with electricity running down my leg. Then I noticed my tingling on my hands, and I started to walk with difficulties.
Yeah, your balance was off.
And my balance was off, so I started to use a cane for a while. And after the cane, I started using the
Walker.
a walker, and then the
rollator.
The rollator, and it started from there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, getting worse and worse and worse and worse, until my daughters take over for me with the doctors and appointments.
Renee, thank you for joining us as well. It must have been very hard for you to see your dad's health declining. How did you get him to seek medical attention?
Well, it took a long time for my dad to sort of admit that something was going on with him. And I think for anybody who might be viewing this, if you know, have anybody close to you in your family who's of my dad's generation, you know how tough as nails they are, right? So my dad was putting up with a lot of pain and not saying anything for a long time. And he would have like those moments of electricity in his legs and he'd wince. So we really tried to encourage my dad to speak to his primary care physician about what was going on with him. And it took a lot of convincing. I think perhaps because there were other people in our family who had this disease. Again, we didn't know what it was back then. It's like we didn't really want to face the fact that he might have the same thing.
Julio, how have the symptoms impacted your daily life?
Well, after I retired, I loved to work with wood, making toys and
Baskets.
pushing baskets, you name it. But after a few years, started to notice I was having a hard time with my hands because I started to lose the feelings of my fingers. So things started to get a lot harder for me to do. And then from there, gave up my woodworking because I was not able to handle anything. Even eating with a fork or cutting the food with a knife is very difficult.
Dr. Geraci, can these somewhat common symptoms of hATTR amyloidosis be misdiagnosed as other conditions?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that is very common. When Julio talks about the tingling and the electric shock feeling and the difficulty using his hands and fingers, those symptoms are very common. And if one thinks from the doctor's perspective, I see a patient and I hear those symptoms, and there could be 500 possibilities of causes. The patient may have diabetes, that's very common. The patient may have a variety of more common causes of tingling, burning. I mentioned carpal tunnel syndrome. That is associated with hATTR amyloidosis, but it's also very common in the general population. So the challenge is to take that list of 500 and narrow it down to the possibilities of a diagnosis that would lead to hATTR amyloidosis. Because it's rare, even healthcare providers and neurologists such as myself are not well versed in the condition and know to look for it. So it's very important to speak to your doctor, as Renee mentioned with Julio, because knowing family history and the dynamics of the patient and what's going on with the patient is going to help narrow that very broad list and move away from the chance of a misdiagnosis.
So how is hATTR amyloidosis diagnosed?
hATTR amyloidosis can be diagnosed in a variety of ways. The most straightforward is speaking to the patient and getting the full spectrum of symptoms that are occurring, getting a family history, doing an examination, and then the neurologist will perform a test called an EMG, which is a test of the nerves. And if the symptoms and the physical findings and the examination and EMG suggest that there is a neuropathy present, then the neurologist can simply do genetic testing of the patient, and it's really quite straightforward.
Renee, you mentioned it took a few doctors to find one who was familiar with hATTR amyloidosis and to arrive to an accurate diagnosis. Can you tell us more?
Sure. So, like I had mentioned earlier, we encouraged my dad to actually tell his primary care physician what his symptoms were. Then the primary care physician made a referral to see a local neurologist. Now, when we went to that neurologist, he ran a few tests and just told my dad that he had peripheral neuropathy. So then, of course, my next question was, why does my dad have peripheral neuropathy? What is the root cause of it? And he just wasn't really helping us too much. So I did some research. I looked for a neurologist who specialized in peripheral neuropathy. We went there, and he tested my dad for everything under the sun. And he was just saying to us, I'm so sorry, we can't seem to find the answer. And in the meantime, my mom saw the show from Portugal, featured on the Portuguese channel, and they talked about an illness called doença dos pezinhos, which is translated as the illness or disease of the feet. And so my mom was like, So she told me about it, she told my sister about it, and told my brother about it, and my sister was the one who actually looked up what that meant. And she said it's something called hATTR amyloidosis. So the next time we went to see that neurologist who specializes in peripheral neuropathy, we asked him to test for that. And his response was, oh, sure, yeah, I'll test for that. That's no problem. But I highly doubt that that's what's causing your dad's issues because it's incredibly rare. But sure enough, he was tested, and it came back that he does, in fact, have hATTR amyloidosis, and that is the root cause of his issues with neuropathy. And now my dad is seeing someone who specializes in amyloidosis. And that's why it's so important to ask to be tested and, to be your own advocate, or if you're a caregiver, there's someone in your family, if you're watching this and there's someone in your family who has been telling you about similar symptoms, that you advocate for them and get them the testing that they need and the proper treatment for them.
Dr. Geraci, you mentioned at the start of this interview that hATTR amyloidosis is prevalent in the Portuguese community. Can you tell us more about hATTR amyloidosis within this community?
Nearly all adults of Portuguese descent who have neuropathy, as Julio does, have a variant in that TTR gene that I mentioned that we refer to as the V30M variant. In persons of Portuguese descent with the V30M variant, the system that is most affected are the nerves, and so neuropathy will occur. In persons of Portuguese descent, and in fact in Portugal, 23 out of 100,000 people who live in Portugal have that particular variant, V30M, which causes hATTR amyloidosis. So it's very important for viewers and our audience to understand this, because as Renee said, being an advocate for yourself and for your loved ones is very, very important, considering the rarity of this condition, considering that it is more prevalent in the Portuguese population, and furthermore considering that in Portuguese adults who have neuropathy from this variant, symptoms start between the ages of approximately 28 and 42. So Julio probably had symptoms for quite some time that could have been detected and potentially treated.
Julio, do you know others who may have had hATTR amyloidosis?
Yes, I had an uncle that he had the disease, and he died from the disease. His son, my cousin. I also had a brother with the disease too. Died when he was in the 80s. Then I recently found out that it's another cousin that lives in Connecticut that has the disease in a wheelchair. So I kind of got puzzled why so many people in my family has that disease. Also, my youngest brother, we just found out that he has the gene for the disease.
Dr. Geraci, can you tell us how it's inherited?
Yes, hATTR amyloidosis is inherited from one parent to a child by a 50-50 chance. So in other words, if a parent has hATTR amyloidosis, every child that you have has a 50-50 chance of inheriting the same variant. And if one inherits the variant, that may mean that the individual will have symptoms of hATTR amyloidosis. So again, this highlights the importance of getting genetic testing whenever there is a suspicion of the disease or condition or there is a family history.
Renee, once you knew your father had hATTR amyloidosis, did you get tested given it's hereditary?
No, I have not been tested, and neither have my sister or my brother or any of my cousins in our generation. But we do know what to look out for as far as symptoms, and if we experience any of those symptoms, then we know to get tested.
Dr. Geraci, conversations about a family history and potentially serious diseases can be difficult to start. Why is it so important for families to talk about their health history?
Yes, I first want to acknowledge that discussions about inherited conditions can be very difficult. This is largely due to the fact that inherited conditions are thought in most people's minds to be genetic, and the word genetic condition and inherited has a negative stigma to it. I always start my interview with the patient and hearing their story at the very beginning, asking about the family history. And I proceed through all types of questions that gives the patient an understanding that what I'm looking for is really just very commonplace entities. Then I move on to, in the case of an individual who has symptoms like Julio, asking questions about other members of the family who have any symptoms that are similar. And I think it's very important to get rid of the stigma of a genetic disorder, because for the clinician who's trying to figure out what is going on, it's whittling down that list that I spoke about of 500 possible conditions or 200, whatever the number is, it's very high. Tingling and numbness can be a lot of things. So having that conversation and allowing the family and the patient to discuss others in their family really starts, I think, with the doctor and the clinician, making it okay to talk about. I think that's really important.
Julio and Renee, you mentioned Julio's brother was diagnosed with hATTR amyloidosis after Julio learned he had the disease. Can you tell us how these conversations have gone in your family?
Well, the original discussions among us as a family were challenging because, like I mentioned earlier, there was sort of this fear of, does my dad have the same illness that his uncle had and his cousin had and that his brother had? So it was challenging among our immediate family. But once my dad was diagnosed and we learned exactly what was causing the symptoms of the amyloidosis, the conversation with other people in the family was a very welcomed conversation. So every year we get together with my dad's side of the family on Memorial Day, so it's the Memorial Day party, we call it. And once everybody had eaten all our yummy food, we got together and I addressed everyone, and we told everyone that we finally have an answer as to what was causing this kind of mysterious illness that a lot of people in our family had. And like I said, it was a welcomed bit of information, and now people in our family know that if they have any questions or experience any symptoms, that they can come to me or my dad or anyone else in our immediate family to answer questions.
Dr. Geraci, what should you do if you find out a disease such as hATTR amyloidosis runs in your family?
Well, the first thing is to stay calm and educate yourself. Hopefully your audience has seen today through Julio and Renee's story that genetic disorders can be dealt with, diagnosed, and can be managed. speak with your doctor who can help provide information and resources. Or you can speak with a specialist, find someone who is specializing in hATTR amyloidosis in a way that Renee did for her father, Giulio. And then one can get genetic testing and counseling, which can provide information on the risk for genetic diseases such as hATTR amyloidosis. Alnylam sponsors at no charge third-party genetic testing and counseling for those who may carry a gene variant associated with hATTR amyloidosis via the Alnylam Act program, which is available in the US and certain other countries. This can be ordered by your doctor. Alnylam has also teamed up with 23andMe through the Plus My Family program, which is a program that provides 23andMe Health Plus Ancestry Service Kits at no charge to first-degree family members of 23andMe customers who are found to be carriers of genetic variants known to cause hATTR amyloidosis. And a first-degree family member is simply a son, a parent, a child, a sibling, brother, sister, somebody in the immediate family. And for more information on this, you can go to the website hATTRbridge.com. I had a patient last year during the height of the pandemic crisis when we were all stuck in home, including myself. I was doing patient visits through video. And my patient, who was 28, was bored, as she tells the story to me, and she ordered a kit through 23andMe, just a straightforward ancestry kit, and the results came back, and one of the results, which she showed me on her phone because I really was so surprised, one of the results told her that she had the hATTR variant that could lead to hATTR amyloidosis. And that was followed with one sentence that said, "We suggest you go talk to your doctor." So she did, and he didn't know much about it, but through that conversation she was able to advocate for herself, much in the way that Renee did for her father Giulio, and she found her way to me. I then verified the 23andMe testing, and she does have hATTR amyloidosis and symptoms. She had mild symptoms. So as I mentioned earlier in the program, symptoms can occur in mid-20s. She's 28 and she's now being treated and she has a very good prognosis.
Giulio, how are you doing today?
Doing very well. I try to exercise with the bike. I also exercise with my arms. I eat very healthy, except for my hands and my feet. It's my only problem. Other than that, I'm in perfect condition. It's just except for my legs and my hands. I have to use a rollator or a walker, and I'm very, very concerned of falling down. But I do take care of myself. Yeah.
That's great. That's very good.
I wanted to leave to see my grandkids going to college.
Renee, how do you think your dad is doing?
Well, you know, my dad never ceases to amaze me. He's such a determined individual, and I'm really happy that he is so disciplined. Like, he keeps his doctor's appointments, like he just mentioned. He does eat a healthy diet. He exercises. He visits with his family and friends, and he stays active. Like you mentioned, he rides his bike almost every single day, a stationary bike. So I think he's doing really well for someone who's 82 years old. So yeah, I'm happy with how he's doing. I mean, he's not able to do the things that he used to do, like his woodworking and like things of that nature, but he's doing really well overall.
Giulio and Renee, thank you for joining me today. Is there anything you would like to tell people who may suspect hATTR amyloidosis for themselves or a family member?
Sure. So we're here to educate people in our community, the Portuguese community, And again, that if you notice any of these symptoms in yourself or see any of these symptoms in someone who you care about, a loved one, that you talk to your doctor about it, and again, be your own advocate and ask for the genetic test, because the earlier that you seek medical attention, the earlier a diagnosis can be made, and then you can have a plan with your doctor, like my dad has a plan with his doctor.
Dr. Geraci, where can people go for more information on hATTR amyloidosis?
For more information, go to the website hATTRbridge.com, where you will find information, resources, and probably most importantly, a physician directory of physicians, neurologists who are familiar with this condition.
Thanks for joining us. This is such an important topic for all the Portuguese families watching this show to discuss with their families. To learn more, visit hATTRbridge.com/resources-and-support, where Portuguese language resources about hATTR can be downloaded. Thank you, and we will see you next time.